Good evening. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Wednesday night Bible study. No videos of me singing with my mom. Perhaps action needed. Close unused applications. Okay. Um, we are going through the book of Matthew. This is my wife's birthday. She's right here. Happy birthday. Um, we are in the book of Matthew, chapter 28. And this is part 3. I thought we were going to finish the book of Matthew today, the whole thing, but I can see that I've got one little section I won't be able to get to at the very end, and it's very important that we discuss it. I take my time with it. But we will get almost through it. Hey, Carol, and hey, oh, thank you, Janet Skinner. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top there, and there we go. With the first verse, but I'm going to zip through and just fill in everything that we've learned, right? Because Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, if you put them all together, you get the whole story, but each one told a part depending on what they thought was most important. And we all do the same thing. We pick the part of the story we think, well, but here's what's really important. So Matthew leaves parts out, so we're just going to fill those in because that's what we've been doing the last couple weeks. So Matthew 28 verse 1 says, "Now after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb." We know that also Salome, who's the mother, not the infamous Salome who danced for Herodias, but Salome, the mother of James and John, were there, the disciples. And we know that Joanna, who was a rich woman who helped support Jesus' ministry, was there. So they were all there. Matthew only mentions 2 of them. "And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord had descended from heaven, came and rolled back the stone." They knew there was a great earthquake because they felt there was a great earthquake, but they thought it was just an earthquake. They didn't know until they got there that the stone had been rolled away. From the door, so an angel rolled away a stone from the door. He's sitting on it. His countenance was like lightning, and his clothing as white as snow. And the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. Some of these guards told what happened. So that's why we know that they saw what happened and they fainted, because they told. Okay, but the angel, now, Mary Magdalene, all she sees is the open tomb, and her fear is, oh no, they've stolen his body. She didn't know who they were. She probably thought it was the Pharisees, the chief priests, had stolen his body and done something terrible with it. So she runs away. She doesn't hear anything the angel says. But the angel talks to the 3 women that are left. But the angel answered and said to the 3 men who are left, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said." Now, everybody, there's a lot of as he said, as I said, because he's trying to emphasize, I kept telling you these things. Please go back and review your tapes so that you know I said this. So this is not new. I was expecting this. I'm not shocked about it. I kept telling you this was going to happen. And that's important in our own lives. We think when we get news, oh my God, we think that's the first time that Jesus heard about it. But he knew all about it. He's prepared. It's all part of the plan. He's good. So he's telling them, he's risen as he said. So please know this is part of the plan. This is not a new thing. Doesn't matter. They're freaking out. Okay. So he says, "Come see the place where the Lord lay, so you know that he's not there. And go quickly and tell his disciples that he's risen from the dead. And indeed, he is going before you into Galilee, and there you will see him. Behold, I have told you." So behold, I'm telling you to tell this to the disciples. Tell the disciples to go to Galilee. Go quickly. Go quickly and see that he's not there. But then go fast and tell the disciples to go onto Galilee, and you're going to see him in Galilee. Disciples did not do that. But they did go in the tomb. Matthew leaves that out. Remember, they went in the tomb. First they saw one angel, then they saw the other angel, and they're sitting kind of at the foot where Jesus' feet would have been, where his head would have been. The angels talk to them and give them the same message. Go together. In fact, Matthew's kind of just summing up what the angels inside said. The angels outside simply said, go in and look and see that he's not there. The angels inside are really the ones who said, go to Galilee. Tell the disciples to go to Galilee. So the women leave. So they went quickly out from the tomb, verse 8, with fear and great joy, and ran to bring his disciples his word. Here's the part that Matthew leaves out. Peter and John show up. They show up because Mary Magdalene went and told them they'd stolen Jesus' body. Mary Magdalene has heard none of this from the angels, didn't see an angel. She just saw an empty tomb, ran. So John show up. So let's read there. I had kind of skipped over their account because we were focusing on Mary Magdalene, we were focusing on the women, we were just focusing on different people. So now I'm going to focus Peter and John. John 20, verse 3. Peter therefore went out, and the other disciple, and we're going to the tomb. The other disciple is John. John wrote the book. He loved saying, and the other disciple, and the disciple that Jesus loved. And then I'm so modest. I don't ever mention myself by name, but I make sure I insert myself into everything so that you know I was there and I saw what was going on. So Peter goes first, and the other disciple goes with him, and they're going to the tomb. So they both ran together. Now they're probably trying to outrace each other because they had this competitive relationship. It says, and the other disciple outran Peter and came to the tomb first. This is John 20, right? So that's like a thing, like, ha ha ha, I got there faster. This is their relationship, Peter and John competing with each other. It says, and I got there first. Okay, then he says, and he, this other disciple who remained nameless, but is me, stooping down and looking in, saw the linen cloths lying there, yet he didn't go in. I didn't just burst into the tomb. Then Simon Peter came, following him, out of breath, okay, and went into the tomb. Didn't look in for, because that's Peter's personality, and Jesus knew this is Peter's personality. Peter just goes. He just talks without thinking. He goes, and Jesus actually doesn't have a problem with that. That's why he's trying to train Peter, because he knows on the day of Pentecost that Peter's the one that's going to get up and start preaching. He didn't tell Peter to get up and start preaching. He just knows Peter's personality. He bursts in. He speaks up. That's just who he is. So God knows who we are and then trains us according to, because Jesus is like, I know what you're going to do, so let me help you do it right, because this is your personality. So Peter just barges right in, and it says, and he saw the linen cloth lying there, and verse 7, the handkerchief that had been around his head, not lying with linen cloth. So he'd been wrapped in linen cloths, and then there was a separate napkin, some say, and handkerchief, there's another translation, around his head. It was lying separately. It says, but it was folded together in a place by itself. Now, some of you may have heard this really excellent story that there is no proof of, but it's really cool. But it doesn't mean it's not true. There's just no proof that it is true about the handkerchief around the head that was folded. And why was it folded? Why did Jesus take the time? He rose from the dead, but let me make sure I fold this thing and leave this here. Why was that important? Okay, so the story goes, well, but it's true. It's true today. If you go to a fancy hotel, if you're in Europe, if you're somewhere, they will, and you bathe, right? They'll say, leave your dirty towel on the floor, crumpled up, and then we know to take it. If you fold it up and put it away neatly, we'll think that you want to use it again. And we'd actually prefer not to keep doing laundry over and over and over for stuff that you're going to just use again. So if you're going to use it again, fold it up nicely, hang it back up, leave it crumpled, we know to take it. So there's a story that it was similar tradition when they would finish eating. The servant would be waiting to see if he just drops it, then when I clear all the plates, I'm going to take that napkin, and that means he's done. That's my signal to clear all the plates. If you fold it, that means he's coming back. So some people say that's why Jesus folded the napkin, to say, hey, I'm coming back. And that could be it. There's just nothing in Jewish literature that mentions that ritual. So it's a cool story. It might be exactly what happened, or it might just be a cool story. But here's what it did for John. Here's definitely what it did for John, and why he might have folded it up. He says he found it folded together in place by itself. It says, Then the other disciple who came to the tomb first, then he went in also, and he saw the linens and the thing and he believed. So this is John saying, when I saw all that together, that made me believe in the resurrection. Why? Because a thief who's stealing a body in the middle of the night does not stop to fold up the cloth. Wouldn't that be cool if thieves broke into your house and then they cleaned up and straightened, take out a broom and cleaned up the window and straightened up? People don't do that. They run in, they grab, and then they leave. So the fact that it was folded up for him said, okay, this is resurrection. This was a planned thing. This Jesus left that for us so we could see. I wasn't taken. I got up. I had time to fold things because I wanted to, so that you would know this was the resurrection, because that's what happened with John. He saw it and realized, okay, his body wasn't stolen, because that's what Mary Magdalene had told them, not because she's dumb or anything. That was her first assumption when she saw the tomb roll away. Oh my God, they've stolen his body. That's what she ran and told them. So they ran to see if his body was really gone or not. Oh my God, and so that's their first thought. Oh yeah, they did steal. But John says he saw it, and oh, they didn't steal any body, because thieves don't take time to fold things up. This was resurrection. And in fact, it says in verse 9, for as yet they did not know the scriptures, that he must be again rise from the dead. They didn't know scripturally, but he says that he saw it and believed in the resurrection because of what he's seeing in front of him. He doesn't know scripturally why he should do it. They didn't get all those scriptures. And I got to say, we're the same way. Now, Jesus told them over and over that he's going to rise from the dead. And that's what John is recalling. For example, in Matthew 12, verse 40, he says, for as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So unless he was a miner and going coal digging or something, he's probably talking about being buried and then he's going to rise. In Matthew 16:21, it says, from that time, Jesus began to show to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised the third day. So he's telling them this, but they're not hearing it. They remember now, oh, I remember he kept saying he's going to rise from the dead. And Peter kept saying, not so, Lord, get thee, so now this is making sense. But they didn't understand the scriptures. They had read. And it's harder to put your own interpretation on it. But they cherry picked certain scriptures about the Messiah, the ones that they liked. And they never thought that he was going to come and be crucified, because he's going to come and rescue us from our enemies. And not knowing the enemy he's going to rescue from is death, from spiritual death. Yeah, that's the biggest enemy. Oh, death, where is your oh, grave, where's your victory? Oh, death, where's your sting? You've lost. And that's what he's rescuing us from. But he's not rescuing it from a tax collector. Oh, Jesus came so we don't have to pay taxes. No. But that's all the stuff that they thought was bad in society that Jesus was going to rescue them from. And he was rescuing them spiritually for something much bigger. So they heard these scriptures and ignored them. Matthew chapter 20, Jesus in verse 18 says, behold, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes. They will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and scourge and to crucify. And the third day he will rise again. So back in Matthew 16, they were still in Galilee, and it was 6 months before the Passover. And we know because of the holiday, the Jewish feast that had just happened. So he's got 6 months until Passover. And he started for 6 months. Every day, it says, he would tell them about, I'm going to be crucified. And every day they went, la, 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 la. Can't hear you. When they were just about to get to Jerusalem, they're 2 days outside. They're at Bethany. They're about to, like a day's walk, really. He says, okay, we're going to go to Jerusalem, and here's what's going to happen. And they still didn't hear it because, and I'm just saying that's us. There's a scripture in Matthew 24. I taught on it for 40 weeks. Matthew 24. Jesus clearly says in Matthew 24, the generation that sees all these things, meaning the temple being destroyed and all this stuff, That generation will not pass away before everything that I'm telling you happens. That generation that sees all of this. And today the church refuses to read the scripture that way because we want to believe that everything he's saying in Matthew 24 is going to happen. But Jesus says, no, this generation that sees that, starting with the temple being thrown out, the generation sees that all this is about you, everything I'm saying here in Matthew 24. And we don't want to believe that. So people say, no, well, then he suddenly starts talking way ahead, and then there's a gap. And so Jesus, I guess, lied when he said the generation that sees this happen, all of this will, but we don't want to believe it. We don't, no, we just choose not to believe it. And that's how the disciples were. There were scriptures that said this Messiah must be crucified, and they would just skip over them. No, he's not. He's not going to be crucified. And so now he's telling them plainly. So John's saying, we didn't even believe the scriptures. We didn't know there were scriptures that talked about crucifixion, even though we read them. We didn't believe them. But now he remembers the things that Jesus said about rising from the dead. And so he sees this stuff folded up and he believes. Okay, so the women have left, and then Peter and John showed up. So they miss each other. Mary Magdalene went and got them. The women left. Went and got Peter and John. Peter and John show up, and then they leave. Okay, then Mary Magdalene came back. So while Peter and John are in the tomb and the women are on their way to tell the other disciples who are still sitting there, because only 2 of the 11 left to go check out the tomb. The other 9 were still afraid, because if they just killed Jesus, surely they're going to come after us. So they're like locked in a room. Okay, so Matthew 28 verse 9 says, and as they went to tell his disciples, as the women now, they're on their way to tell the 9, behold, Jesus met them, saying, rejoice. So they came and held him by his feet and worshiped him, because they thinking, we're imagining this, we're hallucinating. So they had to grab onto his feet. Now they worship him, they prostrated themselves because he's God, but they also touched his feet to make sure we're not crazy. Are you real? Right? So, and Jesus said to them, do not be afraid, because they were like, oh my, are we seeing a vision? Is this a go? What? Who are you? Right? Do not be afraid. Just go tell my brethren to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. So this is like the 3rd or 4th time somebody's been told them to go to Galilee. We know the disciples did not go to Galilee. They just stayed in Jerusalem. Bless their hearts. They finally went to Galilee, but we'll talk about that when we get into John, specifically what made them go and why they had to go to Galilee. So now, verse 10. Now, while they were going, behold, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all the things that had happened. It says some of them went. The other ones who did not go, they went home and talked. It says, oh my goodness, an angel appeared, and right? Some went to the chief priests, which means some didn't. And trust me, if you were on night duty and suddenly an angel came down from heaven and knocked the wall out from the building that you were guarding and sat there and looked at you, you'd have a story to tell. You wouldn't go home and say, oh, nothing much happened to work. They talked. They told people. But some of them went to the chief priest. Here's what they said. They reported to the chief priest all the things that had happened. And when they assembled with the elders and consulted together, right, the chief priests are all having a discussion, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers, saying, tell them his disciples came at night and stole him away while we slept. Because they can't have, they've already said he's not the Messiah. They've announced to everybody and got everybody to give us Barabbas and crucify him. So they can't have this story out that they messed up. When you're in power, you have to make everybody think that you're perfect, or otherwise they'll put you out of power. So here, tell this story, please, that they came and took while you slept. So, and if this comes to the governor's ears that you slept, we will appease him and make you secure. Don't worry, we'll explain it. You won't get in any trouble. We will make you secure. But please tell the story. So they took the money and did as they were instructed. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews until this day. Matthew's written about 20 years after Jesus' resurrection. Matthew, I think, was the first book written about 20 years after Jesus' resurrection. So he's saying even 20 years later, people are still telling the story, because a lie, it's easy. People love them some lies. and they will repeat a lie. They just, I don't know why. So, but they knew, other people knew the real story because the other soldiers had already told them what really happened. But sometimes you can know what really happened. You'd rather believe the lie. So here's the problem with the lie. First of all, there was no doubt that he was really dead. The chief priest had checked. Everybody know that Jesus was really actually dead. So they know he didn't walk away. So either somebody stole his body or he got up from the dead. So he definitely was dead. There was no doubt about that. But there were guards put in place, and a stone was put in place and sealed. So this makes, like, weren't there 60 soldiers there? Yes. And then they roll a stone, and then so here's the problem. If they had simply just fallen asleep, the punishment for sleeping was death. So it's hard to believe that all the soldiers they all just fell out. And the disciples were just a few. There's 60 Roman trained soldiers. There's 11 disciples. They're scary, right? Because when the Roman soldiers had came to the Garden of Gethsemane, the disciples ran. So we're supposed to believe that these men who ran just when they were taking him out to trial were suddenly going to get enough courage to show up and beat up all these Roman soldiers. And then are they strong enough to roll a stone away? Okay, so how would you have known? So either they overpowered them, which is ridiculous, or somehow they magically knew they'd be asleep. Now, if they were asleep, how did they know that the disciples were the ones that took the body? That you were asleep. So how do you know who took the body? How could they roll the stone away without waking you, since it weighs 2,000 pounds? If you're just asleep, you didn't hear a 2,000-ton boulder being rolled up a hill since it took 60 of you to roll it down the hill. So, and so you say, oh, well, we weren't asleep because it was so, if you're awake, then why'd you allow these people there's 60 of you. Okay. So anyway, and then why did your other soldiers tell a different story than you? Oh, these are the Fifth Amendment. I plead the Fifth. So, but they still tell the story, and people will believe what they want to believe. That's just how we are. Okay. Matthew 28, verse 16. So then the 11 disciples, it says, went away into Galilee to the mountain which Jesus had appointed for them. Matthew totally skips all the appearances of Jesus in Judea, how he appeared to them and then came back, and 8 days later appeared to them and kept saying, go to Jerusalem. How he appeared to Peter, how he appeared to Matthew skips those because he wants to get to Galilee because that's his emphasis. The angel kept saying go to Galilee. Jesus kept saying go to Galilee. So let me just skip to the part where he went to Galilee because in Matthew's mind, that's what's most important. Mark talks a lot about Jesus appearing in Judea and Jerusalem before up Galilee, and Galilee's just up north. Just think Northern California, Jerusalem thinks Southern California, right? So before they went up north, which was a long trip, Jesus appeared to them. Mark talks about this. Luke talks about when Jesus was on the Mount of Olives, and John talks a lot about Galilee. So they all decided what they think is the most important thing and including those details. So Matthew does not include any of the appearances in Jerusalem. He immediately says Galilee. What was the big deal about Galilee? We will really get into it in John when we go through the book of John, because John fills in all the gaps that are missing in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Right? All three of those books came out. Then John read all three of them and said, oh, here's what's missing. And he filled in the gaps. So the book of John is different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So we have to go through it. It's very interesting. Now, in Matthew 17, it says, while they were staying in Galilee, because what's so important about Galilee that Jesus says, I'm going to meet you in Galilee? So just to remind us, way back in Matthew chapter 17, it says, while they were staying in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill me. The third day he will be raised up, and they were exceedingly sorrowful. This is right after Jesus had says, who do men say that I am? He had fed 5,000 in Galilee. His first miracle of that sort was in Galilee. And then Jesus as Peter and them were gathering up the food, they heard people talking, and Jesus says, "Who do men say that I am?" Oh, some say you're Elijah, and some say you're Moses, some say all this. But who do you say that I am? That's very important. And he says, "Oh, well, you're the Christ." And Jesus says, "Flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you, Peter. You got it. And because of that, I'm going to give you the keys. You, Peter, you. He didn't say I'm going to give them to the church. I'm going to give you, Peter. You're going to be the one who helps usher people in and out of the kingdom of God. You are going to open up the door that's going to allow the Gentiles to come in." So we talked about this when I was going over Matthew 17, exactly what he means by that. Whatever you forbid and whatever you allow, I'll back you up. Right now, those words are binding and loosening, but it could literally be just what you forbid, what you allow. So you forbid the Gentiles from drinking blood and from doing this and that. That's fine. If you allow, they don't have to be circumcised, and you allow whatever you forbid and allow, because you are going to be in charge of the church, Peter. So I want you to listen to my words. In fact, that's one reason why Jesus probably appeared to Peter separately, to really explain things to Peter to get him ready. And sure enough, Peter was the one who said, "Hey, Gentiles can get saved. This is fantastic." And so anyway, all that happened in Galilee. That was the first place he started to talk about his resurrection. So here's one reason I want you to go back there, so I can remind you of all the things that I said to you there. So let me take you back to that place so you can reminisce, remember those things that at the time you didn't get, you didn't understand, you didn't think were important. Let me take you back there. Also in Mark 9, there was a specific mountain in Galilee that Jesus went up after he left the 5,000. He took Peter and John up to the mountain in Mark 9. You'll recognize this. He says, "And he said to them, Assuredly I say to you that there are some standing here who will not taste of death till they see the kingdom of God present with power." So there's some of you who will not, you'll still be alive when you see the Son of Man and you see the kingdom of God come present with power. That's how Mark translated. There are people standing here. You will see the Son of Man coming up for us. The second half of the first coming, I call it. The second half of the first coming. When I come in judgment, et cetera, Jesus begins talking like that. He says the same thing to the chief priest when he's on trial. There's some standing here. You're going to see the Son of Man coming in power and judgment. And surely enough, 40 years later from that time, the temple's destroyed and et cetera, et cetera. So he's warning them, right? Now, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them on a high mountain apart by themselves. This is Mark 9, chapter 2. And he was transfigured before them. So they saw his glorified body. God gave them a sneak preview of how he was going to look once he was crucified, so they could recognize him whence it happened. His clothes became shining, exceedingly white like snow, so as no launderer on earth can whiten them. Like it was his glorified self. And Elijah appeared to them with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And then Peter answered and said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. And let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah," because he did not know what to say, for they were greatly afraid. Oh my God, Moses just showed up and Elijah. And so Peter can't stop his mouth from running. So he had to say something. "Hey, let's make a tabernacle while you're here," right? And God had to say, "Shh, shh." Right. So it says, very next word, the cloud came and overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved son, hear him." Him. You don't have to, we don't make shrines to all these other people, right? But Mark says, he says this because he didn't know what to say, because he was scared, but he's going to talk. And again, that's who Peter is. Jesus knows that. Once I'm gone, Peter's going to be the one talking, because that's who he is. So he was always on Peter and trying to help him and try to understand. You're going to get up and talk. You're going to get up and say this and say that and do this, because you're the bold one. That's who you are. So I'm going to have to specially train you, and I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom, and know that whatever you allow. So that's why he's always focusing on Peter, because Peter talks. That's what he did on the day of Pentecost. He got up and talked. That's who he is. Jesus knows who we are. So he trains us all separately in different ways, because he knows our personalities, right? So suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one anymore, but only Jesus with themselves. This is in Galilee. This happens in Galilee. They saw his transfigured figure in Galilee. Now, as they came down from the mountain, he commanded them that they should tell no one the things they had seen, because he only took Peter, James, and John up there, until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. So you got to sit on this and hold it, and which caused the big fight later. If you followed the whole thing, I don't know if you remember when I was teaching on it, they got in a big fight because Peter and John and James had gone up in the hill. Well, what happened? I can't tell you, but I just want you to know something happened. That's how Peter is. So, but don't explain it until I've risen from the dead. First of all, they're expecting me to come in as a conqueror, and that's not my ministry. So if you tell everybody I was glowing, that's only going to make it worse. They're going to really think, and they're not going to listen to anything I'm saying about crucifixion, about repentance. They're not going to listen to any of that stuff. If you tell them that Elijah appeared and Moses appeared and I was shining, and they're going to wait for me to kill the Romans, and they're going to miss my whole message. So hold on to it. But after I'm dead, I'll meet you back here at this hill, and then you can explain, oh, that's the resurrection. We saw now we get it, right? So he says, don't tell anyone the things you see until the Son of Man is risen from the dead. Then you can explain the whole thing. So they kept this word to themselves, questioning what the rising of the dead meant. What do you mean, until you rise from the dead? What does that mean? Because they just didn't know what he's talking about. But they remember these words. And that's one reason, another reason why God did this big miracle. And Jesus said, rise from the dead. Because now they can hold on to it. Because it's 3.5 years worth of conversation with Jesus. And if you just think, if you talk to somebody for 3.5 years straight, you remember about a half a year of it. And about 3 years of it would be gone from your brain. Because only our mind's going to hold so much. So some dramatic things Jesus did at certain points, so those things would stick in their minds, right? And this was one of them. Now, 1 Corinthians 15, 5 and 6 says, he was seen by Cephas, which is Peter, and then by the 12. So just so know that once the women left, as Peter was walking home, or wherever he was going, because they went to their homes. It said John went to his house, Peter went to his house. Jesus appears to him, and they have a private session. Then Peter went back and still went in the room in Jerusalem and didn't say anything. And then Jesus shows up there. Why are you here? Why aren't you guys in Galilee? And then he left. Came back 8 days later. Hey, you! Why are you still here? Why aren't you in Galilee? Okay. So it says he appeared to Peter. This is 1 Corinthians 5 and 6. He was seen by Peter, then by the 12. And after that, he was seen by over 500 brethren at once, of whom the greater part remain to this present. Paul's writing this 25 years after that had happened. He says some of them are still alive right now, and they'll tell you that they saw Jesus, but some have fallen asleep. Now in Mark 9, same chapter we were just in, they were in Galilee. They went up to the mountain. They came down from the mountain, right? That's Galilee. Here's another thing that happened in Galilee. And when he came to his disciples, this is Mark 9, verse 14, still in Galilee, still on that same mountain that he ultimately is going to meet them on as resurrection. When he came to the disciples, he saw a great multitude around them. So when Peter, James, and John came down, the other disciples were having this big fight, discussion with people who are Gentiles. So they're Gentiles because Galilee is like right on the border of Gentile area. So some Gentiles had showed up. Including the Syrophoenician woman. Remember the Syrophoenician woman who says, please heal my daughter? Okay, this is Jesus like right on the border, and so he's attracting some Gentiles there. And he sees the multitude, and their scribes disputing with him. So the Pharisees who had followed Jesus, right, and scribes, immediately when they saw him, all the people were greatly amazed and running to him and greeting him. And he asked the scribes, what are you discussing with him? Then one of the crowd answered, the crowd, not the scribes. And he said, teacher, I brought you my son who has a mute spirit. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, gnashes at the teeth, becomes rigid, right? He's having this like an epileptic seizure. So I spoke to your disciples that they should cast it out, but they could not. And he answered him and said, oh, faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me. This generation of, like, why aren't they getting it? The disciples, he instructed them on how to do it, and yet they're still not able to do it. And so Jesus performs this miracle in front of the scribes and in front of some Gentiles, which is odd for Jesus to do it, but he has purpose in it. So That's all these things happen in Galilee, which is where Jesus said, meet me in Galilee, meet me in Galilee. I need to go back there. It's important for me to give my final speeches to you in Galilee, and then we'll go to the Mount of Olives. So when they saw him in Galilee, back to Matthew 28, verse 17, when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Now this is interesting, right? So he's in Galilee, he's on the mountain, he's speaking to the disciples, but also there's like 500 people there. And some are like, is that really Jesus? I heard he was dead. I can't believe it, right? So some are doubted. Didn't I hear he was dead? Let me call the mortuary. So therefore, so he's saying all authority is given to me in heaven and earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations. I'm going to skip to that part. Make disciples of all nations, not just Jews. I want you to start spreading this to everybody. This is the opposite of what he had said a couple years earlier. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 5 through 7, he says, these 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them. So this is Matthew 10, 5, right? He commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles. That's the nations, right? And into any city of the Samaritans, enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So first you got to go to the lost sheep of Israel. Don't go to the Gentiles. Do not go there. We have a duty first to the Gentiles. To the Jews. And in fact, verse 23 of that same chapter 10, it says, but when they persecute you, so he's now explaining, this is, in your mind, you got to think that you got to find all the Jews. This is one reason that Paul kind of went to the Jewish temples first when he was ever on his missions. He would always go to the Jewish temple first, preach to them, they'd kick him out, and then he'd go preach to the Gentiles. But if you feel obligated, let me preach to the Jews first and give them their opportunity. This is the Messiah they've been waiting for, so let me give them this opportunity. It says, but when they persecute you in this city, flee to another. For verily I say unto you, you shall not have gone over the cities of Israel till the Son of Man be come. So you'll see my return. And he's talking years and years from now. But you won't have covered all of Israel. And then there will be my return. And I'm calling this the second half of the first coming, when I return in wrath. When I return in wrath and the temple's destroyed and all the things that happened 40 years after his crucifixion. So for 40 years, they are preaching everywhere. And then Jesus said, now when you see the Romans outside the city, which you call the abomination of desolation, then flee and get out of Jerusalem and don't come back, because now time is up and I'm going to judge Israel. So, but make sure you go to the lost tribe of Israel first, as you go to the Jews first. Now in Matthew 15, it says in verse 22, behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast. Oh, this is Syrophoenician woman. She's not Jewish. And he cried unto him, saying, have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. But he answered her not a word. So he wouldn't answer, and that's on purpose, because a lot of times Jesus is checking our commitment. So like if you were, and he just walks off, right? And to see what she's going to do. If there was some celebrity and, ooh, I want that celebrity to talk to my child, come with me, and you grab your son, and I want you to get the autograph, and the celebrity just ignores you and keeps walking, you have a choice. Well, he's probably busy. Never mind, it's not that important. Or you go, no, I'm gonna, this is gonna happen. And sometimes Jesus is checking their commitment. Are this just a thing that you're doing? Are you really committed? Because you're not Jewish. Shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So do you understand that I did everything I did with the Jews so that I could use them as an example, and therefore then bless the nations? Do you really believe that? And she just held on to him, and they had a discussion, and she says, oh, woman, for this saying, your faith is made. Go, your daughter is healed. You really get it. You really believe. And she was one of the first people witnessing to the Gentiles, just like so Samaritan woman was the first one witnessing to the Samaritans, etc. So Jesus knew what he was doing. But he answered her not a word. I'm sorry. Verse 23, and his disciples came up beside him, saying, well, then send her away, because she won't stop, for she crieth after us. But he answered and says, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He's saying this from Zechariah 10:6. Zechariah 10:6, and says, and I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph, and I will bring them again to place them. So this is, Judah had, the tribes had split in half, and there was the Judah people or the Joseph people, and that's who I've got to come. He says, and to make sure I witness to them, for I have mercy upon them, and they shall be as though I had not cast them off, for I am the Lord their God, and I will hear them. So that's who in Zechariah the prophet is speaking as though he's the Messiah speaking. In Jeremiah 50, verse 6, it says, my people hath been lost sheep, and their shepherds have caused them to go astray, and they have turned them away on the mountains. They have gone from mountain to hill. They have forgotten their resting place, right? And so the Messiah was supposed to go and gather the lost sheep of Israel first. And so that was Jesus's ministry. But his disciples were to start with Israel and then have it spread, so that Israel would have no excuse, right? They can't say, well, we would have repented, but you never came to us. So let me go to you first, so you have no excuse. In fact, Romans 1:16, Paul, writing to the Romans, says, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek, Gentile, the nations. So it's the gospel comes to them first, and then to the Jews, because God singled them out, so they get to hear it first, and then it's going to go to everybody. And then it's for everybody who believes at that point. In Romans 2:9, he gives the opposite. He says, tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that does evil, of the Jew first, and then also the Gentiles. So in the same way they got the word first, they also got tribulation and anguish and punishment and consequences first. So that's the trouble with being first. You get the goodies because you're first, but you also get the punishment first too. So that's what happened with the Jews. There were covenant-keeping Jews who believed, and there were covenant-breaking Jews who did not believe. And the ones who did not believe were judged. The ones who did believe went out and spread the word. Okay, so in Matthew chapter 15, and so we are still in Galilee. We are still, he'd come off the mountain. He'd been transfigured. He had earlier fed 5,000. And then he cast the mute spirit out of this kid, and people believed. And then this woman came, right? So it says in verse 28, it says, then Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. See, because you really believe, and you're going to spread it. Because he got her to say, well, even the dogs get a scrap from the table. He says, yes, I know, because they considered themselves, they've been told, you're just the dogs. You're nothing. We're the Jews. We're the chosen people. You are the dogs. And Christians do that. We're the Christians. You're horrible people. We're the chosen, It's hard not to feel like you're incredible, and everybody else who doesn't believe like you and talk like you is just, but God loves everybody. And we forget that God loves everybody. He loves the prostitute. He loves the person smoking dope. He loves the poor, desperate girl going off to get an abortion. He loves everybody. We need to stop screaming at people and telling them to go into hell, and that God hates them. He loves everybody, right? We tell them they're dogs, and this woman had been told she was a dog. And Jesus says, but don't you think you're a dog? He says, yeah, but the dog get the scrap. He says, yes, that's the attitude. So that when you go back, you got to tell them, you deserve grace too. You deserve mercy too. Even if you're dog, however you look at yourself, God doesn't care. Look how he healed my child. She was going to go and evangelize because she understood, not just in a little way, but totally understood. No, God is for everybody. And all I need is the touch of him of his garment. All I need is a scrap of his table. And that'll change my whole life because he's God. So he wanted to ensure in her mind and cement in her mind, so as she went to tell everybody else what happened, that she was going to start preaching to them. So it says her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Verse 29 says, and Jesus departed from thence, and he came nigh unto the Sea of Galilee. came down the mountain. He's on the Sea of Galilee, and he went up into another mountain, and he sat there because he's trying to get away from people. And great multitudes came unto him, having with them those that were lame, blind, dumb, maimed, and many others, and cast them down at Jesus' feet because they heard about these miracles. These are all Gentiles. These are all Gentiles who are there now. And he says, and he healed them, insomuch that the multitude wondered. Now they're coming to him. He technically didn't go where they were. They were now coming to him. He, in fact, got in a boat and went up in a mountain. So they're coming to him. It's like, well, they seek me out. What can I do? I didn't technically go to them. They came to me. But they're here. They saw these other miracles. And look how they're believing. And my own people keep not believing in me. Every time I go and do something, they try to kill me. So, insomuch that the multitude wondered, so he cast them down to Jesus' feet, he healed them, insomuch that the multitude wondered when they saw the dumb to speak, the maimed to behold, the lame to walk. They were, how is this? They were in wonderment, and the blind to see, and they glorified the God of Israel. So they went, the God of Israel is the Lord. He's the God, that person, their God is the Lord. Look what he's doing. And that's what will truly attract people to the Lord when they see the change in us, they see the miracles in our lives, or they see miracles that he's doing, because God still heals today. He still heals blind eye. He still does miracles, but especially in people's lives. So if you want people to glorify our God, let's show them to him. It's not spending our time telling people how much they're going to hell. But if they see the miracles, they'll want that. They came and they flocked to Jesus and they glorified the God of Israel, even though that wasn't their God. They said, the God of Israel, he is the Lord. And this is how it, again, began to spread and continued to spread. So he went back to Galilee because he not only wanted to minister to the disciples, but those same Gentiles, those same people, he wanted them to, when it says he appeared to 500, it was a mixture of Jews and Gentiles who came and they saw him and they spread the word. He's alive. He's alive. That man who did those miracles, he rose from the dead. And that was part of how it spread. That's why it began to spread to Europe and spread. When Paul got places, when Apollos got to Corinth and when they got various places, the word had preceded them. God had already been there, and they were able to start these churches because God knows how to do it. Won't he do it?
Yes, he will.
Hallelujah. All right. So I'm going to get to the last part because it's quite controversial, and I didn't want to squeeze it in 1 minute. So I pinky swear that I will be finished, I think, with Matthew 28 and the entire book of Matthew next week. Following week, we will start the book of John. All right. Thank you so much again, JJ and Rodney and all these people, Denise, and all of you. You don't have to, thank you that you all say, I know there's a bunch of other people who are listening and I really appreciate it. And the guy from Pakistan is always saying, it's me, I'm here. So thank you. All right. I will see you next week. And on Sundays, we are still in the book of Genesis. And Joseph is about to interpret Pharaoh's dreams and his life is about to change. All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.